This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. All right, Tom, we are talking about everything publishing, from books to courses to Kickstarter. We're going to cover this all because you are the master, and it's super exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate being here.
So you have been involved in some serious launches of books and products and programs for speakers and authors and consultants and coaches of various kinds. Let me start with Amazon, because there is so much BS in that world. And just like there's so much BS in my world, right? With speaker marketing, there is so much BS with like the Amazon bestseller campaigns and what they are and what they aren't. And you have to be in a subcategory of a subcategory at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. You take the screenshot real quick, and then you're an Amazon #1 bestseller. I know that is the diametric opposite of what you do. But of course, that's what we're competing against when we're in this market with some people that are less ethical and less expert than we are. So talk to us about the real kind of Amazon bestseller campaigns, why they're important, and maybe a couple of nuggets that our folks could take away if this is something that they're serious about doing on their own.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to give it some context, when I work with clients, we basically make our profit on the back end, like from sales of books. So I'm not particularly interested in hitting bestseller and then it going away. So that stuff's really, really, really easy to fabricate. And I think anyone could be a bestseller for a day. And then, you get the kudos, I suppose, of saying that you're a bestseller if you want to go that route. People might question it or whatever, but it is what it is. I think you can legitimately maybe call yourself a bestseller in Amazon if you ever get that little orange tag. There's a lot of gray space there. It's not like, USA Today or Wall Street Journal or New York Times where your name is in print. It's officially there. You can definitely say it. And there's certifiable proof it was there, at least at some point too. But to be honest with you, and I will say this and I'll come back to the Amazon, there are ways that people even game those bigger systems too. So it happens at every level. So coming back to when we work with clients, we do digital publishing. We help clients both who are self-published and traditionally published. And we primarily work in the digital publishing space. So, which is specifically in how do we use new media, whether it's podcasting, blogging, e-magazines, newsletters, etc., which have crazy high engagement, way better than print in many ways. You may never get the reach that print does or that mainstream media does, but you'll usually get insane amounts of engagement, people that are really interested in what you're talking about, what you're writing about. And so we help get books in front of audiences that would actually care about those books. So we just worked on a New York Times bestseller called Hustle. And conceptually, that's exactly what we did. Like that one is definitely very mainstream. Like it'll get mainstream press and all that. But what we focused on was getting it in front of those kind of more niche audiences, podcasts and blogs, where this is the type of content that audience would eat up. And so coming back to it, that's the core of what we do. And I think it's the core of what any person who's interested in successfully publishing, whether a book or anything, is figuring out where are those outlets where my audience, my ideal, my target audience, my target readership exists already. Because they're already being spoken to. There's somebody out there who's already capitalized on that market, who's already built up an audience. And the fastest way to make sales of your book, whether for a launch or just ongoing sales, is connecting with that person and getting that book in front of them. And of course, there's a lot of ways to do that.
I love that. And so I just want to put the brakes on. I want people to re-listen, hit rewind, go back in the video, go back in the audio. Listen to what Tom just said, because I think this is what 99% of speakers, authors, and consultants miss. You said whether you publish a book or whether you publish anything, the podcast, the ebook, the online, whatever it is, the online portal. So the idea is, and I talk about this all the time also, people are so focused on book. I say it doesn't have to be a book. What your tribe wants, what your audience wants, are tangible sources of excellence. If that's a podcast, fantastic. If that's your series of YouTube videos that you publish regularly, awesome. If that's your blog, either you're blogging or you're guest blogging, you have a podcast or you're on the podcasts that your audience already is listening to and recognizes and respects and pays attention to. So the book, like a physical book or ebook, that can come early or middle or late. But I think people need to get the message that it's never too soon to start producing and start thinking about those tangible sources of excellence. So tell us how that fits into some of what you do with building authority. I know you have this fabulous event called the Authority Summit, and there's all kinds of different sources of authority. Let's talk about authority marketing and how that ties into your publishing and speaking strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and that's a good clarification, because when we work with people, we don't just work with like any random person who has like an idea for a book. We primarily and exclusively work with professionals, and professionals can, I'll give it this definition of anybody who's maybe runs a practice, so doctors, lawyers, etc., and anybody in the entrepreneurship space who's either kind of has a personal brand, or business owners, whether it's software as a service or they run some sort of service-based or product-based company. Those are the people we work with, because when we launch, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to work with books that I call kind of like platform books, books that the person can speak to for a very, very long time. And that speaks to them and their platform, because I need the author to be able to talk about this for a very long time if I'm working with an author, right? And again, if you want to be an author, you are an author, you need to be able to speak about your book for a very, very, very long time, to the point where you're just nauseated by just talking about the same content over and over again. Because you're like, everybody must have heard this in the world. But the reality is 99% of people will never hear what you're talking about. I mean, take that in for a second. Like probably 99% of people in the world will never hear what you're talking about. So like at most, even if you go for a year just talking about the same thing, you might reach 1% of the population, right? Maybe. I don't even know. I mean, if you really broke down
if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky, right? Exactly. So now you're thinking about think about how micro that is. Like I think a lot of people get caught up in not wanting to be self-promotional, or they think, oh, I've shared this on Facebook a few times already, and so I'm done. The reality is that that's not the case. Like unless that's as far as you want to take it, but I don't think you're going to be very successful in the long run doing that. So when we talk about authority, we talk about the person that people look to and seek out to help them with whatever they're working on. So there's authorities in every niche and every industry. And I think if you're writing a book or you want to write a book, you should be the authority in that space. And a book can help you kind of be perceived that way. Because at the end of the day, the person who wrote the book on topic X is going to be the person that people will hire to speak at their events, will be the person that they hire to do a workshop, will be the person that they share. And here's another thing too, is the one-dimensional aspect of this. If you are, say, I wrote a book a long time ago called The Complete Guide to Pay What You Want Pricing. So for that period of my life, I was the pay what you want guy. And so anybody who had any questions about pay what you want, who was referring people to me, whether it was for consulting, whether it was to go buy my book, whether it was to go check out the articles I'd written on this topic, I was able to become an authority on the super niche thing that most people had never even heard about, probably never will even hear about, like I just told you. But the reality is, by setting myself apart with a book, I was able to have that kind of air of authority. I was literally the person who wrote the book on the subject. And that's a powerful position to be in.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, I got to tell you, if you guys are not familiar with Tom, you absolutely, because this guy's like a Swiss Army knife. He's got like 17 different aspects, and all of it is just genius. But what you just said about, I used to be the pay what you want guy, the pay what you want pricing guy. And as a speaker and as a thought leader, we absolutely have chapters in our thought leadership. So for a couple of years, you were the pay what you want pricing guy. And then you're the launch guy, and then you're the authority marketing guy, and then you're the online course guy, and then not you in particular, although these are all areas of your expertise. But as we're looking at our career, how do you know sort of when to pivot, when to shift, when to make that transition? And do you find that people do it too frequently or not frequently enough? Or give us the scoop on this reinvention process, the way that you see it for yourself and for your clients.
Yeah. So I'll say this with a preface to say that I don't know if I do this well. I think I've done it well enough to be where I'm at and to be successful enough insofar as I'm successful in that context. But I don't know if I'm a master at this. Maybe I've moved too soon to new areas. Maybe I didn't move soon enough. You never know, right? So I just look at it as this way. There's two ways to approach life, and it's maybe three ways. One is goal-oriented, one is process-oriented, and I guess one is just nothing. You just float and you just get, maybe it's the pinball, where you just get knocked around by other events in life that you aren't controlling or purposefully like manipulating, right? Like it's the person that just gets fired, gets a new job, maybe gets gets promoted, gets pushed around from department to department, doesn't really know what they want, just less life. So what we'll say, maybe the unfortunate part is maybe a lot of people live that way, and that's unfortunate. The other two ways are things that we can control, and it's goal-oriented or process or systems-oriented rather. For a long time growing up, I was very goal-oriented. You hear set goals and try to achieve those goals. And I've done that for a long time. And I think looking back on it, I've achieved a lot of those goals that I'd set out to. But in the last few years, everything I've cared about is just being systems-oriented, process-oriented, and saying that if I can approach this with not so much hitting an objective end state, but with living within a set parameter of like ideals and kind of criteria that I consider important in life, like financial independence, time independence, financial security, all those things, but then also creative independence, the ability to kind of create for myself. So as long as I'm working within those parameters, and then of course, also like ethically and morally and all that stuff and living that life, then I feel like the road kind of exposes itself and the turns tell me that they expose themselves when they should on the path. So as long as I'm kind of going down that path and I know that these are the things I care about, these are the left and right limits, I want to create value for people. I want to create a lot of value for people. I want to capture just a little bit of it. And I want to keep doing that all the time. And so as soon as I see an area where I can create a lot of value and I can capture a little bit of it, and maybe I see a lot of opportunity in a new niche like that, and maybe the current one I'm in right now, I feel like, okay, I'm not creating as much value as I possibly could. I shift to the next thing. And I think a lot of people probably do that. I think maybe some of the most, successful, famous, however you want to define these people, like the people we look up to, the authorities we look up to in a lot of spaces, I think they do this subconsciously without even thinking about it to some degree, because they're usually moving to the place where they can create the most amount of value and of course capture some of it. So that's how I live my life.
That's genius. And it reminds me of a philosophical saying that a bend in the road is never fatal unless you fail to turn.
Yeah.
So and I love what you said about kind of like the curvy, you're on the road and then as you're moving, key point, as you're moving, the rest of the road reveals itself.
Yep.
Right? Hugely, hugely powerful. Now, you're also a guy who, like, when we go to tommorkes.com, which we all will, and we look at your books, you have not jettisoned some of these old identities. So we can still buy, for example, the Pay What You Want pricing book. So talk about carrying forward, as you're leaving from one niche to another, you're leaving this trail of the tangible sources of excellence, the books, the podcasts, the articles, the media, the PR, the speeches, all of those things. Is it okay to kind of carry that history with you? It sounds like you are carrying some of that history with you, although you're focused now 100% on your current endeavors. Talk about that kind of current past portfolio strategy.
Yeah. So again, kind of coming at it from where I do, and I, again, don't know if this is right for everybody. Maybe it doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. But if it feels right, if it makes sense, then I encourage you to, maybe start kind of outlining what your parameters will be, what the system or process you want to live by is, so you kind of know what those are and how to just approach things. But in that context, so I look at it that way, because I execute based on systems versus like goals or end states. I don't mind that I kind of personally evolve in some ways, or my work evolves. And I find there's always a thread there. And I have no qualms going back and talking about those other things because they are all interconnected in that way. That got me started, or even before that, there was something else that spurred that interest in that payment and that pricing structure, right? So there's even a story behind that. And there's a story behind that thing. So I don't mind going back and teaching on these topics. So every now and then I will get, messaged or called or pinged or whatever to present on Pay What You Want pricing, or to teach it, or just share some insights or whatever it may be. So I don't mind doing that. And the nice part is I still have those assets. So I can always still point people back to, well, here's this book, or here's this program, or here's this course, or here's consulting on this. And it's still a part of what I do. I don't want to 100% shut it off. It's still like something that I'm still consider myself pretty good at it. Now, if there were ever a time where I felt like, no, I'm actually not able to really produce value in that because I've been so far away from it for so long, I don't consider myself an expert, even though maybe I've written the book years ago, I would probably be honest and just say that. Because again, I just look at it as, where's the most value I can create? And if I can create a lot of value, I can usually capture a little bit of it, and I'll hopefully always be profitable and always make a good living that way. So yeah, that's kind of how it is. But I think I encourage other people to do that too. And the thing that would be kind of I don't know, maybe a red flag for people would be if they kind of did something for a long time and shut it off and totally ignored it or avoided it. I don't know. Then I'd be a little suspicious of maybe that person. But yeah, that's how I look at it. But again, I don't know if that's the remedy for everybody per se.
Sure. No, well, I mean, that's, the whole point is figuring out what's working for successful folks like you. And then if it works for us, great. If it doesn't, great. But, that's why I ask. I think huge misconception, which I know this is an area where you are certainly one huge area of your expertise among many, is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, people, as soon as the concept of crowdfunding comes up, I want to put my book on Kickstarter. I want to do, whatever it is. And I know that in our case, it's mostly with speakers and authors. And I know this is your expertise. It's mostly crowdfunding books, but it could be crowdfunding, products, or it could be crowdfunding movies or whatever. people have the following misconception, and I'd love you to hammer this and then kind of tell us how crowdfunding really works. They say, oh, I'll just put it on Kickstarter. And millions and millions and millions of people are on Kickstarter every single day. So I'm sure it'll work. And I'm a nobody and I've got no list and no platform and no nothing, but I'll just put it on Kickstarter. I'll make a great video and folks will come and I will get $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 to write my next book. Not so much. So tell us about some of the craziness and some of the assumptions that we might have around crowdfunding books. And then again, your perspective on it and how to do it the smart way.
Yeah. So I actually just got an email literally like the other day, somebody who emailed me and said, hey, I had started a crowdfunding campaign and nobody's buying. And so I Googled the topic and I found your resources and I'm emailing you now. And it's one of those things. I feel bad for the person because here's the thing I have to say is, unfortunately, you're in a position where I don't know what you can do if you're already in that position. If you're in the middle of a campaign right now and nobody's buying, maybe just cut your losses, to be honest with you, because we need to go back before you ever do any sort of crowdfunding campaign. You have to realize that important aspect of crowdfunding, which is you need an audience. So if you don't have one, then you can't successfully crowdfund. And there's two ways to do that. One is to actually have your own audience. So you built up over time. So if you have thousands of email subscribers and you have tens of thousands of, downloads on your podcast all the time, maybe you write for Inc. or Time or Forbes or whatever it might be. Maybe you write for, and those are just random outlets. It could be any outlet in your niche or industry, wherever it's relevant, right? And maybe you have all those outlets, you have a following, and I'm not just talking like Twitter, that probably won't get you very far, but like a legitimate following of people who are looking and reading your content and waiting for your content. That's when crowdfunding can be profitable and really amazing. The other way is to find the audience and have a path to the audience you'd ideally like to have, but basically the path to customers through other people's audiences. And this works usually for like tech campaigns. You'll see it like, it'll be like, I don't know, the Pebble Watch or whatever it was. And it's like, I don't know if they actually had an audience to begin with, but I'll tell you what, they had a path to customers through other news outlets, through different people's audiences. They knew the path that they were going to go down. And if you look at that, anybody who doesn't actually start with a pre-existing audience has a path to an audience. So you either have an audience or you have access to somebody else's audience, right? Is what I'm fundamentally getting at. And so if you can't actually get in front of somebody else's audience, then you also cannot crowdfund. And that's a way long shot because a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to do that. But at the end of the day, it's a tough thing to do. You need a lot of credibility. You need a lot of social proof. Most people won't just like, here's my, million person list, or you can get on TV. Here you go. Tell us about your book. Probably not going to happen, right? You usually have to put in the hard work to begin with. So that's why I'll encourage, and I think most people will probably encourage, you build an audience first, get a following first before you ever consider doing something like crowdfunding, which is just a way to generate profit and revenue from, again, an existing audience. But if there's no audience, there's no revenue, there's no sales that can happen.
Such a great insight. And what I'm taking from that very last thing that you said is it literally is crowdfunding. It's a crowdfunding mechanism, not a crowd building or crowd creating mechanism, right?
Bingo. That's exactly it.
You got to bring your own crowd, folks. Got to bring your own crowd. Bring a crowd or make a crowd on a crowdfunding site. Don't expect just posting it's going to be some magic.
I would add to that too. Like when you think about the crowd that you're bringing, you need like probably a sizable audience before you'll ever make any money from it. Because but crowdfunding is not really cool anymore. So people aren't really ready to just like pull the trigger just because.
Totally. No, it used to be just, it's a cool thing. And you spend some time browsing. Now, unless someone pulls your attention to that crowdfunding platform, You're not going there anymore. I'm not going there anymore.
Yes, correct.
Great point. So Tom, I was going to also give you just huge kudos because you are a master of tools and downloads and templates and visuals and ways to help us organize our authority marketing and our book marketing and our publishing strategy. So I spent some time on your website, which again, fantastic, tommorkes.com. Tell us about is it the book marketing canvas? Did I get that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Tell us about that and why that one piece of paper is going to be so valuable to anyone who's looking to write a book or in fact spread their authority in any way.
Yeah. So this is where I start every client, honestly, is with the book marketing canvas. And I'll give a little background on that. So the book marketing canvas is an adaptation of Ash Maria's Lean Canvas, which was an adaptation of kind of the business model canvas. So it's several iterations down the road, but Ash's in particular was for people who were trying to practice like lean startup methodology. It was one page, super clean, clear, and precise that allowed you to identify like who's your target market, how are you going to reach them, what problem are you solving, how are you solving it, what's your unique sales proposition, USP, and then also kind of things like overhead and expenses and projected profit and things like that. Just like when you can capture it all on one page. And I'm pretty sure it was Todd Satterson who originally said this, but maybe it was somebody else before him, but he's the one that I attribute the quote to. So I hope I'm right. But he said, every book is a startup. And he is the former CEO of 1-800-CEO Read, super successful company, book publishing company, and they're just great at what they do. When I heard that quote, I just loved it. I was like, that's true. It's so true. But then why isn't there a business model for a book? Why don't people treat a book then the same way as a startup, which you would start with some sort of marketing plan, some sort of business plan? It doesn't have to be like 50 pages long. It can literally be one page. So hence the adaptation and taking this and now making it so that people can actually use this for the books. So the book marketing canvas. It's a one-page document that will help you plan out both the launch of your book, so starting from scratch, but then also ongoing sales and marketing of your book. And so we go through kind of those same sections, but we focus and tailor it for readers and for kind of the book reading population. Who's your target readership? Who are your first 100 readers? Like getting very specific about that. If you can identify your first 100 readers, you're off to a way better start than most people, and literally writing down their names if you need to. And then what are our marketing and distribution channels? Like how are we going to actually reach people beyond? So if you have an audience, that's great. You have a newsletter, that's great. How do we go beyond that? What are the podcasts we're going to get on? What are the blogs we're going to get on? What are the magazines we're going to get featured in? What are the newsletters what are the other people's newsletters we're going to get featured in? Maybe even having a mainstream marketing plan there too. We work with traditionally published authors who go that route too. So we develop that. So this is the core of it, is defining those things. And then of course, what's the problem you're solving? How do you solve it? What makes your book unique? There's a book published every minute. I think it's probably more than that now. So there's a book published every minute. Trust me, it's competitive. It's probably one of the most competitive spaces out there. Anybody can publish. And so now people do publish. Almost everybody, like a lot of people publish, at least enough to publish a book a day. So you are in a hyper-competitive area, just in self-publishing and being traditionally published, regardless. Just the area of publishing is hyper-competitive, and there's so much noise. So you need to be able to work through the noise. Why do they care about you? And that's what the book marketing canvas is all about, to give you that clear snapshot of what is it that you're all about? What is your book all about? And how do you get to that path to the customers, that path to the readers? How do you get for your first 100, your first 1,000, your first 10,000 sales? Because the reality is most books never sell, I think, is either 100 or 1,000 copies. Regardless, it's not very many. So the point is, as soon as you're selling 1,000 books in a year, you're in the top like 20%. If you sell 10,000 books, you're in the top, seriously, you're in the top like 1%, I think, of publishers, whether self or being traditionally published. And that's important. So it's all about creating that path to that first 10,000 copies.
Absolutely right. I want to just touch on what you just said about competition and noise, because especially in the speaker world, and man, oh man, we're in speaker world when it comes to books. I always say there's two kinds of books. There's good books and there's speaker books. And by speaker book, what I mean is a speaker who simply dashes off something really quick because some idiot at some point told them, oh, well, to be a speaker, you have to have a book. And they're in their basement. They crank this out in 7 to 10 days. They self-publish it. Crappy layout, crappy ideas, crappy writing, crappy cover design, no marketing plan. And they go, okay, I got a book. Someone said I have to have a book. I got a book. And then they wonder why there's no authority, there's no book sales, there's no speaking gigs, there's no ripple effect from that book whatsoever. And then people say, well, I wrote a book, but it didn't do much for my business. Talk about, does the book have to be good? And what's your definition of a good book where we are going to be able to stand out from all the noise and all the competition and the one book every minute being cranked out? How does all that come together?
Yeah, so I'd have to break it down, but I think I've worked with probably about 90% of the clients I've worked with have been self-published, which it does not mean cheap. It just means they want creative control. They want creative license over every aspect of the marketing and sale of their book. They want to control pricing. They want to control design. And they do. The people we work with do that. And they make sure that everything is top notch. Because here's the beauty of it. You can get amazing designers to do a book cover, whether it's in paperback and digital, for less than $1,000. And you can have a masterpiece. You can have somebody design the interior formatting of your book, Kindle and paperback and any other platform you want to put it on, PDF, whatever. Again, probably for about $1,000, maybe a little bit more, but give or take ballpark that. You can get a great editor for maybe a couple $1,000. Now all of a sudden you're like, what is your overhead right there? It's less than $5,000. And you can produce a really remarkable piece of content that I think, and this is the case, it needs to be something that is standalone, professional, and looks like it could have been traditionally published. You need to have that feeling. And it's so easy to do it, but it's also easy not to. So I think a lot of people just choose easy not to. They don't put the time and attention into making sure that it actually feels like a traditionally published book. And, at the end of the day, can you really measure that impact? I don't know. I think a lot of stuff happens subconsciously. So if somebody sees your book in person, maybe they get to have the paperback and it looks or feels cheap. How is that going to impact you? Maybe the content's great. Maybe you'll be fine. But maybe because of that, maybe that person doesn't even recognize that it feels cheap, but just subconsciously it feels cheap to them. And that you won't be the person that they share. You won't be the person they bring on for the keynote or whatever it might be. And it just seems like such a loss. So the reality is put some time and attention to the design and formatting. I think that's key. And then kind of moving forward with it is just making sure that when you release the book, you do so in a very professional manner, like you do things intentionally, which is all that means to me. Be intentional about your marketing. A lot of people just put it out there and say, hey, here's my book. And then that's it. And it's like, yeah, well, there you go. You might get a little bump in sales for the first day and then it goes away. So have a plan, have an intentional plan behind how you are going to hit that first 100, first 1,000, first 10,000 copies. And over the course of 12 months, put out time and effort into that first day or two. But that first day or two does not matter at all compared to the rest of the year. And I'll give you a couple stories. One, some of the clients I've worked with, Cass McCullough, she self-published with me a couple of years ago. I remember right after she published her book, after we did our launch together, she had, I think, 2 clients that came in at about $10,000 immediately after from having a book. And then a more recent client, I can't say his name with the book, but he's done 50 grand in consulting and is since the launch of his book less than 8 months ago. And that's not to even mention just the book sales themselves. So that's what a really good book can do for you if you do it well. And there are literally, I could come up with dozens of case studies on that. Literally every single one of my clients, I think I could come up with, I could share you the numbers of not only books sold, but more importantly, what that's done for their business. And that's kind of where we come in, is we help develop that sales funnel. Are we not only just selling books, but does that generate new leads for higher ticket items, right? For coaching, for consulting, for speaking. These are the things that are ultimately going to really build your business. 1,000 book sales is great. It's nice additional income. But I'll tell you what, if 1% of those 1,000 people pay for your $10,000 package, your consulting package, now all of a sudden we have a legitimate revenue generator, a new, sales funnel to generate new business for you. And I think that's the key. That's where you want to focus.
Going back to the pivoting and going back to what you said just a few minutes ago about you better be excited about this book. We're putting $5,000 plus into the book, which is low, by the way. So I love that you're saying we're not talking about if you could spend a whole lot more money on that. And for $5,000 to get just the physically produced book to be awesome is fantastic. And then of course you want marketing help, you want, platform building help, all of those things on top of that. But because we're going to be building our business on this for years and years to come, are people making a mistake by thinking they have to crank out a book every 1 or 2 years, almost like we were talking about pivoting our topic or pivoting our niche? Even if we stay in our niche, I stay in marketing, someone else stays in leadership, someone else stays in customer service. Do we need to be cranking out a customer service book every 2 years? Or is that just based on ego, or what's that coming from?
And again, I don't know what it might be coming from. There might be part of it might be ego. I think part of it might be like peer pressure, just being in a space where that's what people are doing. It's like, oh, okay, wow, this guy just came out with a new book. He came out with a new book. And people brag about being prolific in publishing lots of books. Like, oh, I'm the author of 10, 20, 30 books. That sounds well and good, but I'll tell you what, there's amazing authors. I just have his book. I just bought it. Robert Cialdini, who wrote Influence, and he just came out with Persuasion. But I think Influence had been out for 20 years or something like that. And this is his next book. So no, I don't think you need to aggressively publish. Another person I was just on a call with recently was Nir Eyal, who wrote Hooked. And that book's been out for a minute and he hasn't written anything new. It's a great book. It has longevity, has evergreen. It's not, here's the stuff that's working right now and won't work in 6 months. So there's no reason to necessarily rush to something new. And as an example, with the book we just did with Hustle with Neil Patel, Patrick Vlaskovitz, and Jonas Kaufler, that book is going to be around for a long time. Hopefully it'll be a book that people are talking about in 10 years. And that's kind of the point, I think, or ought to be the point for a lot of people in their book writing processes. How do I create something that will have legs for a very, very long time? Because again, and I think this is the confusion of self-publishing, because it is so easy to publish. We think, well, we should be doing it then because it's so easy. But the reality is, publishing is really great and books are really great because they are really amazing at sharing a message. And so again, if you have a good message to send, why try to send lots of other messages? Why not stick with one for a while? If it presents itself in the future where a new book makes sense, I think that's absolutely the case. You should do it. You should never feel compelled not to, just because you've written a great book before and that maybe is the basis of your platform. You shouldn't feel discouraged to write a new one. But I'm of the mindset I would never encourage somebody to rush to a new book unless it was like really like they had so much new information, so much new experience, so many new ideas they just had to put into a new book. It has to be, I think, so compelling for you to say no to it. That's when it's right to write a new book.
Right. And it could be that they're writing a book every 18 months or every 2 years because they didn't get the previous book right, or that previous book didn't sell enough, or it didn't have enough platform. And so they're trying to make up for quality. And I don't mean quality of the book, quality of the impact. You're trying to make up for the quality of the impact of that book that maybe didn't do so well with like, okay, let's do another one and let's do another one. So 3 or 4 books that are not really big bestsellers does not equal one bestseller, does it?
And you know what I would do before I'd rush off and write a new book is I would just republish that book. And we've done that for people where we've gone and we said, okay, this is the initial idea. This is what we thought was going to happen with this. And it didn't work out. And we treat it like a startup. And the book doesn't do so hot in the first month or 2. We realized really, actually, maybe we're missing kind of the marketing on this. So maybe let's put a fresh coat of paint on the cover and redo the title and subtitle and see what happens. And yeah, from those things, you can actually increase sales. It's not rocket science. Just a lot of people don't put it in the attention or don't pay attention to this and then don't put in the time and energy to make it happen. It's actually not that hard. So again, self-publishing is so easy. It's so easy to switch out a new cover and a new title and just test a new title and a new cover and see how that actually impacts it. And that could literally be the thing that changes it for you. So consider that before you rush to go write a new book because it's a lot of work. Maybe consider just putting a new fresh coat of paint on your book and then re-releasing it.
Yeah, I love that. So Tom, fantastic, fantastic advice. I can hear the resistance in people's minds that are listening to this. Is that, oh boy, Tom's a really smart guy, but you know what? This sounds like a lot of work. I'm already busy. I've already got clients. I'm doing all this other stuff. I don't want another thing to start. Now, you happen to be also a master of starting and shipping and kicking things out the door. So you've got the Gunslinger's Guide to Starting. You've got the Starting Workbook. Tell us about why are we so resistant, not only about starting, but then about finishing and getting things out the door. So we have a starting problem and we have a finishing problem. And I'm asking the master for some help.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it comes down to a few different areas where we find that resistance. So one of my favorite authors of all time is Stephen Pressfield, who wrote one of my favorite fiction books or historical fiction, Gates of Fire. So good about the Battle of Thermopylae and the Spartans. Anyway, it seems like everybody in the military that I know has read it, or at least like from West Point, it was like a big book, like everybody read it. And so then I found out that he wrote some nonfiction books too. He wrote The War of Art. And when I picked that up, I was like, wow, this is really good. It was actually kind of inspiration for me to start writing in the first place, start a blog and all that. And he calls it resistance, that this is the thing we experience anytime we try to do something worthwhile or bigger than we are or important. We'll hit resistance and it'll manifest in many different forms. Procrastination. Or as soon as we start a project, we sit down to write and we're like, wait a second, we're not organized enough. So I'm going to go organize my stuff first. Or, okay, I'm going to start writing, but actually, you know what? I'm going to research first. I'm going to research a little bit more. Or, okay, now I'm at this point. Okay, now I'm really going to focus. But then actually, I forgot to make this call. I'm going to call my friend. I haven't called him in a while. It's been a while since we talked. And this is how it manifests. And everybody who's probably listening probably is like, yep, I've experienced that. And we all do. I experience it all the time. Every person experiences it. And I think the important thing is to recognize it never goes away. That resistance will always be there. It will always be tempting you and seducing you and drawing you away from wherever it is you need to go. So understanding that that's ever present, then what do we do about it? I think we can mitigate the risk of resistance crippling us by kind of creating our environment intentionally. So those are things like reducing distractions. So how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of tools and tech out there to actually reduce distractions. Things like Newsfeed Eradicator, which I use for Facebook, or I think there's tools where you can just like block out all social media sites. There's other tools I think where you can just block out internet use for a while. So if you just wanted to sit down and write, that's a great tool to use if you're constantly the person who keeps going to check like social media or check your email. I just use this new app. It's like Hide Inbox or something like that. And it hides my inboxes. So when I pull up Gmail, they're hidden. I can still search the tab to find stuff because I have so much stuff in Gmail that I always like want to search, but I don't want to open that up and see 30 unread emails and one that says like, looks like it's urgent. I need to take a look. There's nothing in your inbox that's urgent. Trust me. You're good to go for 24 hours. If anything's in your inbox, just consider you have 24 hours. There's nothing urgent in an inbox. So things like that, you can manipulate your environment. You can create your environment in such a way that you are not tempted. That reduces the temptation of distraction. And that also just makes it harder for temptation to act on your impulses. Okay, I'm going to go to Facebook real quick. I'm going to check Twitter real quick. You get rid of that stuff off your phone. Get rid of your phone. Throw your phone outside of the office until you're done writing. And then mark out the time in your calendar. put it down in your calendar, 1 hour a day, and you'd be surprised if you just committed to 1 hour of just typing, even if it was just free flow writing, no editing, don't even think too deeply, don't worry about researching. And 1 hour a day, you have 30 hours over the course of a month. I bet you'd have a manuscript by then if you just committed to doing that once a day. So then for those people who are just too busy even for that, or who are a slow writer, I'm kind of a slow writer, so I get that. You could literally just dictate. So outline everything you want to talk about. Outline it just like you do bullet points. Maybe ask some questions about whatever it is the topic is. I usually structure things like this. If you're doing a nonfiction book, it's easy. What are you talking about? Why is it important? How does it work? What are some questions that people ask about it in their particular situations of why it wouldn't work? And now you have the construct of every chapter of every nonfiction book ever written. And you can use that. So here's what the chapter's about. Here's why it's important. Here's how it works. And then you just go through and answer Q&A questions that people might bring up. And that's it. And if you do that, that's the easiest thing to literally dictate, send to a transcriber. They'll do it for $1 a minute or maybe less or something like that. And all of a sudden you could get a 60, 80,000 page book done in less than probably a couple weeks if you just dictated it, and not too expensively. Again, you pay for the transcription. You probably pay for good editing. That's all stuff that's going to happen. You make the trade-offs there. But that's another way to, if you are truly somebody who just always gets blocked when you start writing, that's a great solution.
Absolutely. And, I love that because you know what? You're never going to have a global bestseller if you don't market. You're never going to have a book to market if you don't write. And you're never going to write the book if you don't start.
Yep.
So, Tom Morkes, thank you. Tell people how they can get connected to you and Insurgent Publishing. How can we stay connected to you? How do we get more Tom?
Just go to tommorkes.com, TOMMORKES.com. I push everybody there because that's where you can find out all these crazy things I'm working on. So whether it's a new book or a new launch, we just did a couple very, very large scale 6-figure course launches that sometimes I'm at liberty to share about. So if you're interested in that stuff, that's the place to go check it out. That's where I put all my recent writings. I have a podcast there as well. So anything you're interested in, and if you're just interested in getting in touch with me, go there. Trust me, you'll find my email and you'll be able to get in touch with me. And that's the best way to communicate. And I respond to every email. So definitely reach out.
But only when the inbox is visible and only when you're in email mode.
That's correct. On my terms.
That's it, buddy. Fantastic. Thank you. We'll talk really soon, Tom. I appreciate your expertise.
Thank you so much, David.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.